Welcome to In the Arena, the podcast where politics and policy come alive. I'm your host, Mindy McAlindon, and today we're diving deep into the issues, the power plays, and the strategies that shape our world. So whether you're a political junkie or just curious about how things work behind the scenes, this is the place to be. So get ready to jump into the arena. Joining me today is Alan Phelps. Alan is a board-certified security professional. He's also founder and CEO of IPTalons, Inc. It is a research security service provider. He specializes in safeguarding intellectual property and trade secrets. Notably, he developed a top-tier trade secret protection program at Merck Co, and he has extensive experience in research security training with Texas A&M University. But I think most interesting, Alan also served nearly 20 years with the CIA in a variety of roles. So let's bring Alan on.
Hey, Mindy, how are you?
Well, I'm good, Alan. Welcome. Thanks for joining me today.
Absolutely.
I am so excited to have you here. You and I have spoken a couple of times, and I just find what you do, your history, so fascinating, but also a little bit scary, if I have to be honest about it. As a state legislator, I have focused on making sure that our state is protected from undue influence from foreign adversaries by passing some legislation. I've got some more to pass this year, but it seems like it's just an ever-changing landscape. And I can't ever seem to stay ahead. So let's kind of start at the beginning. You spent a lot of your career focused on protecting intellectual property. What do you think the biggest security threat is facing research and innovation today?
Yes, so a lot of people don't realize this, but most innovation in critical technologies and emerging technologies come from people that are never trained on how to protect that innovation. It is the biggest risk. And in fact, most of our economy and our innovation goals are in the hands of people that are focused on the science and the technology, but they're unaware of the threats that are coming at them. And so my biggest concern is that we have untrained or unaware individuals that we are relying on to create our critical technologies and our emerging technologies. And they simply do not know how to defend themselves, especially when we think about nation state and foreign influence approaches that are coming at them.
So you talk a lot about big corporations. What about small businesses? Do small businesses have the same issues that these large corporations and universities have?
Absolutely, yeah. So in our ecosystem of innovation, while we have prime contractors and in terms of defense contracting, for example, or the Department of Energy, a lot of that work goes to prime, what we consider prime contractors. And so those large corporations typically have mature security programs. They have counterintelligence teams that are specifically trained. They have government backgrounds that can lock down innovation. But what that ecosystem relies on are the subcontractors, the subawardees on those grants. And you could go from a very sophisticated security program held by a prime contractor and go immediately to a mom and pop that is doing the nuts and bolts of the work that the prime contractor has been contracted to do. So I view the small organizations as the number one vulnerable weakness in our supply chain, because we rely on these smaller companies and smaller organizations to do much of the work, and then they simply don't have the resources, including basic cybersecurity hygiene. Forget about advanced counterintelligence to defend the technology that they're helping build.
So let's dive a little bit into your history. You worked with Merck, and I found some of the work that you did with Merck pretty fascinating. My first job out of college was with Merck Pharmaceuticals. I was a drug rep. So I just love hearing kind of you from the other side, much higher level than I was, hear what you did. So tell me a little bit about what you did there and what you accomplished.
Yeah. As a corporate security professional, I had the best job in the world, I believe. I was a director of intellectual property and trade secret protection, which barely fit onto a business card, but it was a really fascinating role because at the time Merck was a 125-year-old institution known for its life-saving and life-improving drugs. Really, just a hallmark of a company, and so critical to patients and drug discovery around the world. My job was to protect the early discovery supply chain. So early discovery research, early stage research, where before a drug becomes a drug, it starts its life off as a trade secret. And so in big pharma like Merck, you have to keep a trade secret for about 7 to 10 years before the proper patents get applied, and when you have the intellectual property apparatus that kicks in with a fully licensed drug. And so keeping a secret for 7 years is very difficult to do. But my work at Merck, I felt like we did a really good job. We wrote policies, procedures. The number one thing I did was train our employees on what the threats were. And so, as I mentioned at the beginning, was I realized that unless you come from government or some sort of military background, you are never trained on how to protect secrets, whether they're government secrets. In Merck's case, it was trade secrets. And what I discovered, what I learned in Merck was even people that touched our trade secrets didn't know that they were handling trade secrets. And so step one was to identify who had access to our most critical technology and our most critical targets, and then basically brief them on what the responsibilities were. So it is scary, quite frankly, for people that don't come out of government or military to realize that they are the single line of defense in a lot of cases against nation state or advanced competitors or unethical competitors that are trying to get that. So I started with training, and then we developed a lot of tools around data loss prevention, how to identify behaviors of the very few individuals that were there for the wrong reason. And so I got a lot of exposure to how to build technical controls so that when someone misused or misplaced our trade secrets, we knew immediately. And then the final few years at Merck were spent following the trade secrets. So in big pharma and a lot of our critical technology manufacturing processes, it starts with the core company, which I felt like we did a really good job in locking down our trade secrets and training our personnel. But ultimately, our supply chain required we hand that trade secret over to an external supplier. So contract research organizations, contract manufacturing organizations, oftentimes outside of the U.S. and in places like China and India, where you might have where you have good contracts in place, you simply don't know how that trade secret is being treated. So the last couple of years that I spent at Merck was really working with our attorneys and our supply chain managers to say, let's really understand how our trade secrets are being managed, and then hold our suppliers to the same standard that we required of our employees, which was handle our trade secrets in the following ways. And then I had the right, in every contract that Merck wrote, I had the right for a security audit, which means I could go follow into the supply chain, go down to the suppliers and say, show me your controls, show me how you're protecting my asset. And then we would take course corrections in the event that they were not up to our standards. And so it was a phenomenal experience to go from the early stage and watch a drug go all the way through development, through this scary time of trade secret protection, into patent protection, and then ultimately into the market where we commercialized it, monetized it, and be able to kind of reap the benefits of that early discovery.
I'm sure you felt like you had a piece of that action, that you just really were part of the birth of those drugs. I remember selling them and them telling us, this has been worked on for 10 to 12 years, and billions of dollars have gone into this by the time you get that little pill into marketplace. So I'm sure to you it was like birthing a child over many, many years.
So I guess my question was, the employees, when you're doing this at Merck or any other corporation, is it seamless to the employees, or do they feel like their privacy is being violated? Do they even know what you're doing? Like, how does that work as an employee in that company?
Yeah, so Merck was an early adopter of what we commonly refer to as insider threat management. We were very sensitive to the employee. We never called our program the insider threat program because Merck was different. A lot of companies are realizing that employees are not the enemies, right? And I always cringe when I hear insider threat, talked about on social media and in professional circles, because it basically denotes employees as this enemy within, and somehow they're going to turn on you. And my approach to Merck, and Merck as a company, we were very pro-employee. And so my program, we focus on the asset, right? So we when you focus on the asset, in our case, it was the early discovery pipeline and in the trade secrets related to drug candidates. And so when you focus on the asset, you could do some incredible things like talk to the employees about why we're doing this. And so in corporations, it's always good because we obviously we care about the patients, we care about the company and the brand and the shareholders and the stockholders. But at the end of the day, we all had a common goal of making sure the company succeeded. And so it was very easy to kind of rally the employee base around my program, because the conversation that I had with all those employees, especially those working in R&D in the Merck research laboratories, was that we all know the importance of this drug, right? And we don't know if it's going to work. And of course, pharma gets a bad rap because of the cost of drugs. But as you mentioned, it's billions of dollars that go into this, and the odds of a drug candidate actually turning into a marketable commercialized drug is very low, right? And so our employees had incredible tenacity and patience, because you literally could work on something for 10 years or 20 years and then never see the light of a drug. And so our approach was to explain to our employee population, what are the threats coming after us? So we had nation state, we had unethical competitors from all over the world trying to tap into our pipeline. And so I was able to rally our employees to say, you're part of this defensive team here. In fact, you're the most important part of it. I can help guide and frame and build in the tools and help us identify the risk. But at the end of the day, it was our researchers that had to recognize the threat coming at them, and then hopefully remember my training and my guidance on how to defeat that. And so we had a wonderful relationship with the employees from a security, which is, security is often seen as a cost center or something you have to have. But in my personal experience, they saw the trade secret protection program as a way to protect their interests. And one thing I've learned about scientists and researchers is that they love their work, right? And so we always call it putting the benefit up front. The reason you want to help us protect this asset is that it is your life's work, and if we do our job right, that drug candidate will go through all the clinical trials, and it will become a drug, and then you'll have the knowledge and the pride to know that you were part of a team that put that together.
I love that. I love the way that you framed that and that you brought them into it and it wasn't combative. I think so many times as an employee, we look at that as you're just trying to catch me. I have to watch everything I do. And instead you framed that as we're a team. And I love that. But that tells me that's what made you such a great CIA agent. So you were able to bring people into what it was you were doing and to find the advantages there. So can I dive into a little bit your background at the CIA? So kind of tell me, it is so fascinating to me what you did and how you even got into the CIA.
Yeah, most if you ever meet someone that left the agency in an overt classification like I did, some people can never tell you that they were there. But I made the decision when I left after a couple decades that I wanted to be able to put that on my resume. But most everyone that I've ever met that either worked there or had an association with it. It was always an accidental employment, right? Almost all of us were on our way to something else, or we came from something that got us into that line of work. And so, in my case, I had ROTC, junior ROTC in high school. I was on my way to become an Army officer, and I was so naive. I was 18 years old. I was naive enough to think that I could just in the Army become a surgeon. The result was the Army wanted me to drive a tank, right? And so, my recruitment story was I just happened to run into a guy that had a CIA hat on, and as a complete joke, I said, "Why don't you give me a job there? Because the Army wants me to drive a tank." And it turned out that he was a recruiter for the Office of Security at the CIA, and the rest is history. I took that job.
Do we think that was truly an accident?
Absolutely, yeah. Because I was
a
kid. Yeah, I was a kid growing up in the middle of Virginia in a farm community, and I literally pumped gas at a full service gas station, and I had seen this guy 3 days a week, three nights a week. He would come in a commuter van. and I would fill up his tank, and he would sign the house charge account. I had no idea what he did, other than I knew he commuted a lot. And literally my first night back from the ROTC officer course that I finished, he had a CIA hat on. So all divine intervention, or maybe it was planned, but I've always been a hand raiser. So when an opportunity presents itself, you always take it. And he was nice enough to entertain basically a kid saying that, I want a job there. And the rest is history. I've always had a great work ethic, and every opportunity that came up, I said yes to. And ultimately, I made my way to the DO, which the Directorate of Operations, because all along the way I met great people who said, if you're going to be at the agency, you want to be a case officer, right? That was always the recommendation, and didn't know what that was, at least.
So what is a case officer?
So it's we call it the pointy end of the stick, right? So it's the field deployed employees that are out there, spotting, assessing, and recruiting foreign assets in order to provide policyholders and the U.S. president, policymakers and the U.S. president intelligence, so that they can make better decisions, right? And so that sounded like a great job. It sounded exciting, and it's everything that you think it is in the movies. At least in the training part, I always joke that it can be a little mundane, post office like, if you're not careful. But I had a wonderful experience. I grew up with that agency, literally both professionally and personally, just able to grab so many experiences. And the wonderful thing about that agency, if you get involved and you work hard, there was always an opportunity. It was one of the most amazing places ever. And so I was fortunate enough to have a career there first, which set me up for the rest of my, quite frankly, I think I have the best training and background to do research security. On the corporate side, we call it insider threat or trade secret protection. On the academic side, we call it research security. But the fundamentals are the same. You have an asset to protect. How do you do that? Do you know your adversaries? Do you know your threats, and do you have a plan to mitigate that? But my coming out of a small town in Virginia, I got to see the world. Did some amazing things. I personally think I shifted the course of history twice, and
Wow.
And nobody ever knew your name, which was kind of neat. And but obviously, the men and women that do that work, it's a lot of sacrifice. Just like our armed services, people may not give it credit like we do with the veterans, which is duly, obviously, well deserved there. But we, there are Americans out there that are protecting the Constitution of the U.S. and you'll never know their name or their face, but it's. I always recommend, when I run into a college student, I go, look at the agency. Every job is available there, regardless of what your specialty or your major is. And not that I'm a recruiter for the CIA, but just having that experience, it opens you up. And when you recognize, how dark the world can be, it really sets gives you a much different perspective. And you'll do a couple of things. You'll appreciate your country a lot more. And despite all of our flaws and our pimples as a country, it is the shining star. It is the beacon on that hill that many people around the world still aspire to get here and to be a part of. And if it wasn't for us, it would be a much different world. And so, being able to defend and support my country, I've always had that calling. So it was a really cool place. But I will say that I feel like I'm doing more for our fellow citizens now, protecting our innovation and our trade secrets, because that truly is where a lot of our critical technology is being lost. And so I feel like I've come full circle. But the theme has always been there. So.
That's really cool. And I do know that you are constantly recruiting, because you actually spoke to one of my children about the possibility of joining the agency. And I love that. So I do want to jump a couple of places. I forgot to mention, you are local, right? You live here in Rogers, Arkansas.
That's right. Yep.
And I love that you were here and you were working with with our companies, you're working with, I think some of maybe our universities, and I know I'm trying to get you to work with our governor as well to continue to protect Arkansas. And so I love that you're kind of a homegrown talent for us. I do want to jump into universities. I find universities to be really fascinating because they are so open, right? Universities, by definition, love research and they love collaboration and they love international collaboration. And it seems to make them a real target for exportation of these academic institutions, right? And so I think you have people who can use that to advantage their strategic interests. So talk to me a little bit about that. I think you've had some experience there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm the founder of IPTalons, which stands for intellectual property. Given my life's work, most Americans don't realize that advanced technologies and all the great critical technology and emerging technology that we have, almost all of that starts its life at a university. It was news to me. I didn't, I always assumed that somebody would just wake up one day and go, "Oh, I have a bright idea. Let me go make that." The reality is, it's our entire economic development strategy in our national security and our economic security depends on innovation and moving things from basic science to applied technologies. And the reality is that all of our cutting edge technology started its life off as a basic or fundamental research project at a university. So the beautiful thing about research universities is that it's staffed by people that are just truly curious about how to do things differently, or let's try to see if this works. And so essentially, since the beginning, the founding of our nation, we relied on our faculty members and our professors to think of the new things, right? So to run those experiments that may not go anywhere, but you want to really push the basic and fundamental science. And for 50 years, we asked our professors to do a couple things. One, we asked them to solve the hardest problems, and we also asked them to go out and do that problem solving with the best and brightest minds in the world. And so we also, this might be a national phenomenon, but we always assumed that Americans have the best ideas. And the reality is, now that we can see the world, and there's so much information out now, our best and brightest minds can be found anywhere on the planet, right? And so it doesn't mean you have to be born in America and you're going to automatically know science and technology. It turns out that our best minds can be found in places like China and Russia and India and all over the world. There are really smart people that come together, and our academic community has been just incredibly effective at finding the best and brightest. And so either we collaborate when they're in their home countries, and we work with them on research projects, and collectively we take an idea and we think of something better and newer with it, or we attract that talent to come and study here in the United States, and they come over as undergraduate students. Hopefully they stay for graduate studies, and they become PhDs and postdocs. And for the past 50 years, that's how our innovation has occurred. Now, I would argue probably starting in 2015, 2016, we realized as a government that a lot of our advanced technology, especially our defense technologies and our dual use technologies, started its life off in academic settings, right? And so there was, which on paper doesn't sound too bad until you realize, wait a minute, there's a really good chance that we had a foreign adversary gaining access to our early stage research. And while basic and fundamental research is exactly that. It's designed to advance mankind. It's advanced to grow knowledge in general, and that's how science and technology works, right? We think of things and we just keep moving the needle, right? And so we have tools in technology that we didn't have 100 years ago because of that process. What's happening now is that we now recognize that all of our weapon systems and all our advanced fighters and all of our drone technology and our AI. If you look at the White House every year puts on a critical and emerging technology list, right? And so it's basically a list of all the technology that will make a lot of money or defend America. And so there's this idea that, okay, maybe we have to be a little more cautious and careful about who looks at that early stage research before we turn it into an applied applied weapon system or applied commercial solution. And so the phenomenon that's happening now is that we have this class of cultures. We have academics that signed up to teach and to promote science and technology and move that bar forward for the betterment of mankind. But what has happened is that we've actually had we funded a lot of that research. So taxpayers in Arkansas and in every state, through our federal grant systems and our state grant systems, we have funded that basic and fundamental research. And so what we've discovered was we needed to put some rules around that discovery, right? And so things like the NSPM 33, which is the National Security Presidential Memorandum number 33. Hard to get out there, but NSPM 33 says if you get federal taxpayer money, that we expect you to do certain things around security. So what the big risk now is that do we understand who's actually in our supply chains, and we know higher ed institutions. If you didn't know this, they're in everyone's supply chain. Somewhere along the line, whether you're a company or a government agency or a state agency, there's an academic partner somewhere in that supply chain. And if you don't look for foreign influence, you will never find it. It doesn't pop out automatically. And so a lot of the country, certainly at the federal level, and now the states are beginning to pay more attention to this, is do we know who is actually working on our research and development, and can we do something? What do we need to protect that?
So help me understand. Are you saying that we have people who are intentionally coming to our country, to our universities as undergrad or graduate students with the express purpose of taking that information back to their home country? Or is it that there are people here who see an opportunity to sell that information? Like, kind of, what is that?
Sure.
What does that look like?
Yeah. So the number of people that are conducting espionage is extremely low, right? It turns out that you don't need to have a professionally trained intelligence officer to go collect a trade secret or a research security project. If you have something called the internet and LinkedIn, or you have the ability to just go ask the question. So as I mentioned earlier, that the people that are developing our new technologies, unfortunately, are not trained to protect our new technologies. And so that's what we're facing right now. So, countries like China, Russia, and Iran, and even North Korea, they recognized a long time ago that if you want to gain access to America's innovation, it's very hard to steal the finished product. It's quite easy to get involved in the supply chain. And so a lot of our basic and fundamental research, we have research collaborations, or in some cases, the foreign countries actually sponsoring or paying for that research at the U.S. institution. And so if you're part of that development team, it's not actually considering stealing it because you either funded it or you're a part of that research. And we estimated 98% of U.S.-based researchers are collaborating with higher risk institutions abroad or individuals from countries of concern, China, Russia, Iran, namely, and they're doing it not out of malice. They simply do not know that what they're doing is quite dangerous, right? And because academics, if I could just generalize, they look at the world much differently than those of us that came out of government or in government. They see the world as one big happy place where these are just friends and we're going to work on something together and we're going to advance science and we're going to do really great things with this stuff. They don't realize that their collaborators might have a part-time job with things like the People Liberations Army, for example. And so it's a class of culture because the very people that we've asked to develop our technologies are now the ones that we have to rely on to protect it. And so the number, it's a very small percentage that come here to purposely steal. It does happen. Of course, we know if you're a company or an institution that's working on critical tech, so AI, quantum, semiconductor, chip memory, any of that stuff that has military and dual use application, there's a very good chance that you're definitely going to be a target of a nation state. The question is, are they already in there? Are they already on your payroll or somewhere in your supply chain, or are they trying to get there? So we always recommend, how do you do, are you doing due diligence? Do you actually know your employees? Do you know your suppliers? Have you conducted basic due diligence to say, I know this person came out of that national lab, for example, in a country of concern. So I'm going to do, while we still want their effort, we want their brain to come help us. We do want to put some controls around there so they don't actually, if they decide to work for someone other than the institution, that they don't actually have the ability to download all of the data, for example. So there are some fundamental security controls that need to be put in place, but usually we don't think about those things until we've already lost it, and then
It's already happened. Yeah. So one of the things that you do at your company with IPTalons is you actually look at that supply chain for those weaknesses, right? Because each individual company may be doing their job, but as I go through the supply chain, I may have a corporation who maybe doesn't have as tight of controls, and we have people who will find those weaknesses, right? That's kind of their job. Their purpose in life is to find those weaknesses in the system. So so as you know, I'm a state representative, work with the government, and we find this within the government itself. So like, for example, one of the laws I passed last session was to say that the state cannot go into contract with companies owned by the CCP. Like, that's a no-no, which is great, but that's just one thing. What else can we be doing even at a governmental level to protect our government from being infiltrated by people who just want data, whether it's stealing IDs in, banking data, or if it's actually taking proprietary information or hurting even our, we'll come back to the grid. I think electric grid will be an interesting one too, but go ahead on the government side.
Yes. So the biggest gap that we see is the lack of knowing who you're doing business with, right? And so we're state governments and certainly the federal agencies. If you have the purse string, if you have control of the purse strings, and so one of the biggest things the state of Arkansas can do, for example, is to vet who they give research grants to, for example, or contracts. And so what we discovered, things like the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, they're very good at kind of masking. So knowing who your suppliers are, actually having the ability to not just look at an address and go, well, that's an address in the U.S. It must be a U.S. entity. Actually doing true open source intelligence gathering, which is there a parent company? Is there a subsidiary? Can you follow the tracks? Because what we've learned is that as human beings, even places like groups like the CCP and its state-owned enterprises, they can get very lazy, quite frankly. They'll reuse the same PO box, or they'll use the same phone number, or the same emails. And so the great thing about America today is that we have tons of data. The problem is that we have tons of data, and it's really hard to figure out where the connections are. So companies like mine, I'm not the only one that does it, but we have the ability to take a look at, can we identify, I call it the Kevin Bacon game, which is how close is this person that we want to do business with, how close are they to a known or suspected nation state threat? And obviously the CCP is the ultimate thing, the risk there, because they actually want to take us over as a superpower and kind of wipe us off the face of the earth. And so if you don't understand China has that goal, then we have some bigger issues. But the ability to do diligence, know your suppliers, know your employees, know your contractors, is always step one. And even if you have to do it retroactively, so if you have a bunch of contractors out there, run them through a due diligence so that you can actually understand, is there a connection here that we have to worry about?
That is great. Well, I think we're getting short on time. I do want to ask you one more question just about our energy grid. I think that it's really important. We have different things going on. Of course, we had a Biden administration who was trying to shut down coal plants and those kinds of things, which I think was a threat to our security for energy. But also, I think we have issues with protecting it from some sort of terrorist attack. Is that something within the scope of what you do as well?
Yes, so it goes back to the we do a lot of program assessments, right? So we help companies go in and say, do you know actually who's working for you, right? And of course, our critical infrastructure, including our power grids and our water, there's always a computer there that if it wasn't patched properly, so we do a lot of cybersecurity assessments and to say, do you actually know how to protect the data? And of course, we now know that China and other places have really targeted our critical infrastructure so that they can turn it off if there's ever an international event. They want to be able to disrupt American lives and then by default really cause corruption and havoc in that. So one of the part of the due diligence is knowing if you have somebody in that supply chain, know who's doing that research. If there's oil and gas or water. Anywhere there's a researcher, you should understand what their affiliations are and where the due diligence gaps might be. And on the critical tech, make sure that their cyber is sound, and really have a third party verify that, because most of American due diligence is a self-certification that I'm telling my boss or my contractor or my funder that I'm doing these things, and there's really no check and balances. And so I believe that we need to have a third-party audit of things to make sure that at least on this date and time, the standard was being met and gaps were identified, and there was a plan to close those gaps.
That's great. Alan, thank you so much. We are so blessed to have you here in Arkansas, helping us protect and secure our corporations as well as our government and our universities. So I appreciate all that you're doing. And I look forward to talking to you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So Alan has given us a lot to think about. I mean, clearly every corporation, small business, university, or even our local governments can be targeted by foreign agencies. And it's not just stealing IDs or bank accounts, but it's also trying to steal proprietary information or create informants within an organization, or even create weaknesses in our systems for something nefarious. So it all sounds very Cold War, cloak and dagger, but in reality, as Alan explained, it's all very real. It's just more it's just different than it used to be. So utilizing new technologies, but people also are exploiting people's weaknesses. So I hope you will take a look, that you will check out IPTalons. If you have a business and you're concerned about your security, I hope you enjoyed the insights that we had in this discussion about the evolving landscape of security and research, as well as intellectual property protection. And then thanks for joining me today. I'm your host, Mindy McAlindon. I look forward to seeing you next week in the arena.